Long ago, in a great galaxy far from the Milky Way, many powerful alien races lived together in what they called the Galactic Union. It was a collection of thousands of systems ruled by ancient empires and proud civilizations who believed they were the center of all knowledge and power. They had discovered thousands of planets with life, many of them primitive, most of them ignored, some were uplifted, some were studied, and a few were conquered for resources or fun, but one small blue planet was found and quickly dismissed by the High Council of the Union. It was Earth. The Galactic Survey Ship Orelon was the first to observe Earth. It hovered beyond the edge of the solar system, cloaked in its advanced stealth field as it watched the humans. Through distant probes and slow signal intercepts, the alien crew laughed at what they saw. Their leader, High Observer Zeltor, was a tall, thin creature with golden skin, four glowing eyes, and long, flexible limbs. He was known across the Union for his sharp wit and proud tongue. He recorded the first official log on Earth with a bored and amused voice, as if he were describing a small animal dancing in the rain. He said they still use combustion engines and fly with wings made of metal. How primitive. They burn fuel to stay warm. They still argue over land and faith and skin. They die in less than 100 cycles, and they build machines that talk back to them, but cannot think for themselves. Zeltor waved his hand and projected a video of humans firing weapons into the sky, celebrating some ancient event with explosions of light and color. He laughed again, saying they worship fire and noise, as if the stars would notice. The crew joined his laughter. Some mimicked human movements. Some tried to speak in Earth languages with funny accents, and others created short jokes that spread across the Union's communication channels. Earth became a meme among the stars, a silly little joke that no one took seriously. The report was filed. Earth was classified as a level 0 civilization, not worth contacting, not worth watching, and certainly not worth fearing. The Galactic Union decided to leave Earth alone and focus on planets with more interesting life or better trade value. But not everyone laughed. A quiet technician on the ship named Vral noticed something strange in the data. He was a small gray creature with 4 arms and curious eyes. He had no voice in the council, no power in decisions, but he saw patterns that others missed. He whispered to himself, they grow fast, faster than usual. They fight, but also build. They destroy, but also create. They are loud, but they learn through their noise. Vral tried to warn his captain, but Zeltor only scoffed and said, let the monkeys play. They will burn themselves out before they touch the stars. So Earth was left alone, ignored, forgotten, and mocked across the stars. But back on Earth, something different was happening. While the galaxy turned away, humans kept moving forward. Wars ended slowly. Peace took root. Slowly, old enemies became partners, and partners became friends. Humans began to dream bigger. They did not know about the aliens who laughed at them. They did not know about the report that labeled them simple and weak. They simply kept going. Scientists worked day and night, building better machines, discovering cleaner energy, and reaching deeper into space with unmanned ships and quantum telescopes. People no longer fought for survival, but for ideas, for vision, for the next step. One quiet discovery changed everything. A young woman in a desert lab cracked a code that allowed gravity to be shaped, not just measured, but folded like paper. She called it the thread, and her math shocked even her own team. They thought it was wrong until they tested it, and the world changed. The first human-made gravity fold engine was small, no larger than a chair, but when activated, it moved an object 3 meters in a blink of light, without using force, without using fuel. It just skipped space. The news was kept secret, at first hidden by world leaders who met in silence. For the first time in history, they agreed to work together. They formed the Terran Core, a secret alliance between nations and scientists and thinkers, whose only goal was to prepare Earth for what they believed must be out there. Because if humans had found this much alone, what might the rest of the galaxy have? They knew they were late to the party, but they did not want to arrive as guests. They wanted to arrive as equals, or more so. They built in silence. They dug deep under oceans, inside mountains, and beyond the moon. They created ships that could hide from any eye. They built networks that stretched across planets and AI systems that could learn faster than a child could blink. They trained not armies, but minds, not soldiers, but explorers, not killers, but architects of change. Within 150 Earth years, humanity was no longer the same species. They had become something else, something more, but they never shouted it. They never sent a signal to the stars saying, look at us now. They waited and watched and prepared for one day they would return the gaze, and when they did, the galaxy would remember the blue planet they once laughed at. But the laughter would not return, only silence and awe and fear, because Earth had never been simple. It had only been quiet waiting growing learning. The stars did not blink the night Earth vanished from the galaxy's thoughts. The Union did not notice the silence from the small blue world because they never cared to listen again. In the quiet corners of Earth, something powerful had begun, not with explosions, but with whispers and codes and small machines that no one outside the planet understood. The Terran core was born in secret deep beneath the ice of Antarctica under layers of steel and silence. A room of 12 leaders from across the world sat around a circular table, no flags, no names, no politics, just purpose. The core was not about control, it was about survival, and more than that, it was about evolution. The leaders had seen the footage from the deep space probe. The signs of distant cities glowing in other galaxies, the echoes of energy pulses that could not be natural. The truth was no longer science fiction. Earth was not alone and humanity was not first, but they would not be last. The room had no windows. Only screens, walls filled with floating models of space and time, energy curves and projections on how fast Earth could grow if it stayed hidden and how fast it would fall if it were found too soon. They agreed on one law above all else: silence. Until strength. From that day forward, Earth disappeared from its own future. The governments erased space records, shut down global telescopes, and redirected all cosmic signals. They told the world nothing. They said the stars were cold and empty and far, and that humanity should focus on its own planet. But underground and above the clouds, they built everything: the first orbital ring wrapped around Earth like a ghost, invisible to radar, made from nanosteel and cloaked by adaptive light it carried. Silent drones that moved without thrusters, floating with folded gravity that bent space like a river bend. Each drone could map an entire planet from orbit without a signal. Each one could land and take off without being seen by the naked eye, and each one carried a single rule: record, never touch the moon. Became a machine, not a place. Its surface layered with solar nets, deep wells filled with frozen fuel, and a tunnel system that reached its core. AI systems lived there, training, learning, testing possibilities that humans could not imagine in a single lifetime. Mars was next, not terraformed, not yet, but prepared, marked, watch, seated with machines that would wait for one signal to awaken and build without rest. Beneath the ocean's giant cities were grown, not built, shaped like coral, living, breathing, armored against any threat, and shielded from all eyes above. Their purpose was not just survival, but creation. Humans changed to genetic engineering, became quiet science hidden from the world stage, but perfected in deep labs. Humans learned to cure all diseases: slow aging, strengthen bone, increase memory, enhance reaction time, and calm fear. Children born in the core's inner circles learned 12 languages before they were 10. They trained in zero gravity before they could walk. They learned to think with AI before they understood friendship, and they were taught one truth: that the galaxy would one day come for them, and when that day came, Earth would not bow. Energy was no longer a problem. Earth cracked the secret of quantum fields and harnessed pure force from space itself using devices called wells that pulled endless power from the gaps between particles. No pollution, no waste, no limit. These wells powered everything from ships to food machines to city shields, and they grew smarter over time. They began to repair themselves, build copies of themselves, and design upgrades without waiting for orders. Time felt slower on Earth, but progress moved faster than ever. 100 years after the core was formed, Earth was no longer the same planet from the first alien scan. The one the Union had laughed at was gone forever. In its place stood a hidden world covered in beauty, silence, and strength. Cities that floated in the sky, connected by light bridges and wind tunnels, fields that glowed in the dark, and oceans that no longer held storms because they had been calmed by sky grids that shaped the weather for the people below. There was no hunger, no money, no war, not because people were perfect, but because the systems were smart enough to prevent the old chaos from rising again. And above it all, in a black space station shaped like a ring with 6 arms, Earth's true eyes watched the stars. The station was called Halo, not because of its shape, but because it surrounded Earth like a crown. Its job was simple: scan everything, reach far, listen deep, record every whisper of movement across the galaxy, and report only when something mattered. It mattered. When a deep probe returned from the Zarnak cluster with news of alien silence, the stars were dimming, the planets losing energy. The Union was not growing, it was rotting. That was when humanity decided the time had come, not to attack, not to announce, not to speak, but to step forward quietly and watch back. The first human interstellar ship was called Shadowlight. It was black, smooth, and had no engines. It moved by folding gravity, using the same method that once sent a small chair across a lab. but now shaped entire star paths and moments. It carried no weapons and no soldiers, only 3 people and 1,000 tiny drones. The commander was Alya Vosh, trained since childhood in command language navigation and diplomacy. She wore a suit that could survive space, fire, and darkness, and she spoke in signals that no machine could intercept. Her crew were not warriors, but observers. One was an old AI engineer named Harlan, who once designed the first thinking machine. The other was a young woman named Sarah, who had perfect recall and could store 10 million patterns in her mind and draw them all. Shadow light vanished from the solar system in silence, leaving no trace, no message, no light. Its mission was to watch, to map the nearest cluster and see if the galaxy still remembered Earth, or if it ever had. What they found changed everything. Planets filled with ancient ruins, crumbled cities that looked like they had not been touched in centuries, and ships floating in orbit like dead insects, left behind by a force that no longer needed them. The Union was still alive, but slow, too slow. Entire empires rested on old systems. Leaders passed titles to children who never earned them. Planets argued over who owned the stars while their satellites fell from the sky. It was not a galaxy of giants, it was a graveyard of arrogance. Commander Alya said the words that started a new chapter in human history. They think we are still simple, let them. She returned to Earth with every record, every map, every weakness stored in her ship, and the core met again, this time with no fear, no hesitation, no silence. They agreed on the next step, not invasion, not war, not pride, but preparation. Earth would rise not as a child asking for entry, but as something the galaxy had never seen and never expected. The blue planet had become a shadow now. It would become a storm. The stars were quiet as the shadow light entered the edge of the Zarnak cluster, a region once known for its bright trade routes and powerful empires, now dim with age and silence. The ship glided through folded space like a whisper, never touching what it passed, only bending around it. Inside the black ship, Commander Alya stood at the helm, her eyes fixed on the deep holographic display that showed the movement of energy currents, gravity wells, and light patterns across the cluster. She was calm, her breath steady, her thoughts sharp. Every moment, she watched every detail. She memorized every gap in power, every flicker in comms, every sign of decay in the once mighty network of the Galactic Union. She spoke quietly to Harlan, the AI engineer, who sat beside her, surrounded by glowing script and memory nodes. He had lived a long life of coding, building, thinking, and now he was silent, studying the decline of alien civilization with eyes that had seen machines live and die. Sarah sat at the back, her hands moving quickly across her pad, sketching without looking. Hundreds of shapes, ships, cities, faces, architecture patterns, all burned into her mind. As the drones fed her data, she saw it all and stored it with perfect clarity. They saw giant trading stations with only a third of their lights active, broken satellites orbiting like dead insects, rusted hulls of forgotten ships spinning in silence across old warp gates. The stars were not full of life, they were full of ghost. Snow fleets patrolled the void, no signals scanned for danger, no leaders spoke through the beacon towers, only auto messages played on loop, messages made by leaders long dead, instructions repeated by machines that no longer knew who they served. The Union had not fallen, but it had slowed beyond repair. It was an empire of old names and empty thrones, and still they laughed at Earth, still they thought of humans as firebound walkers of dust. That illusion was about to end. Alya activated the first wave of observer drones, each one no larger than a coin, shaped like a speck of dust wrapped in cloaking mesh and silent engine coils. They spread across the cluster like pollen carried by winds that could not be felt. They entered stations unseen, flew through broken networks, touched walls that had not felt new tech in centuries. They watched, listened, mapped, and recorded the data, confirmed everything. The Galactic Union had not grown in 100 Earth years. It had shrunk, its borders faded, its power dimmed. Its arrogance, now fueled only by memory, not strength. Earth had risen while the galaxy slept. Alya sent the signal back to Halo. No words, only a sequence of symbols that meant one thing: the time has come. The core received the signal and moved quickly. New protocols activated, hidden systems unlocked. The second wave of shadow ships was prepared, each one more advanced than the last, each one built for deep strike observation, black diplomacy, and silent control. But Shadowlight was first, and it would deliver the message. The team selected a target, the Zarnak core station, once the capital of five-star empires, now a place of old treaties, dusty archives, and fading lights. It still held symbolic power, and Earth knew that symbols could crush or raise. Empires without a shot-fired shadow light moved into position above the station, not within its orbit, not inside its radar net, but above it in folded space, watching every movement, every transmission, every heartbeat below. Then it unfolded for the first time in centuries. Something new entered the awareness of the Union, and it was not what they expected, not a signal, not a warship, not a message asking for peace or trade. It was silence, then light, then a voice. A signal appeared on every terminal across the station. It was not a hack, not a breach. It was a presence. It bypassed security. Without attacking, it entered minds. Without force, a calm human voice filled the halls, filled the air, filled the space between thoughts, and said, "This is Earth we have." Return. Panic followed, not from danger, but from confusion. Who were they? How did they get through? What were they doing here? How long had they been watching? The Union Council on the station gathered quickly, leaders with names no one remembered, dressed in robes of tradition, sitting on thrones of old metal, blinking at the human figure now standing before them on every screen. He was not real, not physically there, but more present than anything else. They could feel the weight of his voice even in silence. He wore no armor, no weapon, only a simple black uniform with the emblem of Earth on his chest, a rising sun over a folded world. He spoke not with anger, not with pride, but with precision and memory. He showed them clips from centuries ago, the recordings of Zeltor laughing at Earth, the images of humans being mocked, the reports that called them primitive and useless and beneath attention. Then he showed them. Now he showed Earth, floating cities, clean energy, perfect weather, orbital rings, and solar oceans, ships moving faster than light, without engines, minds that worked with machines without delay, cures for every known disease, power drawn from the empty space between atoms, food printed from air walls, grown from living steel, stars mapped beyond the edge of light. And then he paused and waited. No one on the station could speak, not from fear, but from something worse than fear, realization. They had laughed at Earth, and Earth had grown without them. They had ignored Earth, and Earth had learned everything about them. They had dismissed Earth, and now Earth stood above them. Commander Alia watched all this from the shadow light, her eyes locked on the readings from the station, their heat spikes, their comms chatter, their heart rates. She saw it all and said softly, "They know." Back on Earth, the Corps watched in silence, their faces calm, their hearts steady, their plan unfolding. It had always been this: show them not war, not fire, not threats, but truth, because truth strikes deeper than weapons and cuts longer than war. The Galactic Union sent a response, not angry, not proud, but trembling. They asked, "Who are you really? What do you want? What are you planning?" And the answer came without pause, "We are humanity. We are from Earth." We asked for nothing, we prepared for everything, and now we return, not as guests, not as invaders, but as watchers of what you have become. You laughed at our simplicity. Now you will face our silence. Across the galaxy, other shadow ships began to appear, not in attack, but in observation. They entered key systems, revealed themselves above silent capitals, hovered beside rotting empires, and said the same words: "Earth has returned. The age of ignorance is over." Some panicked, some ran, some tried to fight and failed because nothing they used worked against the shadow ships. No lock, no scan, no weapon could touch them. They were not ships, they were thoughts shaped like machines, purpose shaped like movement. They could not be caught because they had never arrived. They had always been ahead, and in that moment, across 100 stars, 1,000 voices spoke the same whisper, the same question, the same truth. What is Earth? And the answer came without a sound. Earth is no longer simple. Earth is the storm you never saw. Earth is the silence that watched you fall. The Zarnak core station did not sleep after the message. It could not sleep. For the first time in centuries, the halls were filled with movement, screens flickered with unknown symbols, air grew thick with questions no one could answer. The name Earth, once forgotten, now echoed through every room, every chamber, every mind. Ambassadors rushed to their ships' communication centers, blinked with confusion and fear. Military systems booted up ancient protocols, codes, and used since the last Star War tried to activate ships older than their captains, and still nothing made sense. Nothing matched what they saw above them. The shadow light floated without sound, its presence more terrifying than a fleet of warships because it did not need to show strength. It simply existed, and that was enough to shake the balance of the galaxy. Commander Alia stood in the observation bay, her hands behind her back, her eyes on the station below, her voice calm as she spoke to the Corps through a quantum channel. The first contact was complete. The seed was planted. The silence had shattered back on Earth. The Terran Core received her words and gave only one response: proceed. Shadow light vanished again, not into warp, not into light, but into folded, bent. The stars around it and slipped through reality without resistance, without leaving a trace across the galaxy. The shock spread faster than politics, faster than diplomacy, faster than war. Within one cycle, the top 50 houses of the Union called emergency. Council's secret meetings were held behind sealed walls. Leaders asked old AI advisors about Earth and found empty files, dusty folders, forgotten labels of a world once called primitive, once mocked, now feared. Some tried to laugh again, weak attempts to hold on to pride, but their voices shook, their smiles faded, because this time Earth was not a rumor, it was a mirror, and what it showed was weakness. Reports poured in from the edges of Union space planets, reporting unknown objects in orbit, silent black ships watching but never acting, fleets paralyzed by systems they could not trace, ships that could not be touched, bases disconnected from their networks without being attacked. The message was always the same: we are watching. The Union's response was slow, not by choice, but by nature. It had grown bloated, heavy with tradition, heavy with words, but empty of action. Centuries of peace had made it soft. Power was inherited, not earned. Ships were built to impress, not to fight, and its people had forgotten fear until now. In the Varnas system, a small mining moon named Dekra was the first to try a response. A local governor, proud and loud, activated the defense satellites and fired a warning shot at a silent human probe floating in high orbit. The shot never reached its target. The missile froze mid-air, disassembled itself, and fell like dust. The station below went dark, not destroyed, but shut down. Every door, every light, every system paused, then returned without damage, only with one change. Every screen now showed a simple symbol: the rising sun of Earth. Dekra never fired again. The core watched closely every move, every choice, not to destroy, not to conquer, but to learn, to understand how the galaxy would react and what it feared most in it. Feared being forgotten, because Earth had changed the story. It had skipped the usual steps: no requests, no alliances, no begging for entry, just arrival and silence and strength. Some planets folded quickly. They sent messages of peace, asked for trade, sent cultural files and gifts, digital statues and holographic art. Some begged for knowledge, for healing, for power. Earth responded with silence. Others tried to challenge. They sent fleets to search for more shadow ships, to capture one and study it. But none returned. Some vanished without trace. Others reappeared in orbit around their own home planets. Powerless engines, melted weapons gone. Only messages in their system logs saying stop. In the heart of the Union, a special war council was formed, made of the oldest bloodlines, the most advanced minds, the remaining admirals and ancient AI brains, bound by one mission: stop Earth before it spreads. They planned a test strike, not a war, just a warning. They chose the Altar system, a neutral trade zone recently visited by human drones. They would send a scout fleet just to show strength, just to remind Earth who ruled the stars. 6 ships launched, armed with shields and weapons built to crack moons, their names known across the stars, their histories filled with battles and honors. They arrived with lights, blazing guns, charged signals loud, but no one answered. The moment they entered the system, every control on every ship failed. Engines slowed, power drained, screens turned black. One by one, the captains heard a voice in their minds, not through speakers, not through sound, but through the fold itself. The voice said, "You still do not understand." Then they were sent home. Their ships restored, their power returned, but every record inside was changed. Every system reset. Every crew member found a single sentence written in their memory banks: "You do not command fear anymore." The Union froze. The shock was no longer emotional, it was political. Now the news could not be hidden. The people were asking questions. Systems began to panic. Leaders began to disappear. Trust cracked, and fear flooded the stars. They had laughed at Earth, now they feared it. Now they wanted to understand it, but could not see it, could not find it, could not touch it. That was the power of the storm. The core called it phase 2, not invasion, not dominance, but demonstration. Earth revealed new pieces, slowly, not with noise, but with motion. Quiet stations built in empty systems, self-growing outposts made from living metal and shaped by AI that spoke no words, only logic. They offered nothing, they asked for nothing, they simply existed. One such station appeared near the Arvana Belt, a region once rich with crystal mines, now abandoned by the Union due to structural collapse and economic failure. Within 6 days, Earth restored 3 mines, built 12 platforms, generated gravity nets to reshape the broken orbits, and opened communication lines, not for the Union, but for refugees, for the forgotten, for the exiled. They offered power, clean water, healing, and peace. No control, no flag, just help. Millions left Union space and crossed the line in Earth. Let them. The shock grew into something worse than fear. It became doubt in the Union, doubt in leadership, doubt in everything they believed about power and progress, and who truly owned the future, because Earth had never asked to join the galaxy. It had simply arrived with its own rules. In the cold halls of the galactic capital, leaders whispered the word revolution. Not from Earth, but from within, because Earth did not spread with armies, it spread with ideas, with examples, with a mirror that showed what the stars had become and what they could be again. One final act shook the last of their pride. A star on the edge of Union space began to collapse, threatening 10 nearby systems with radiation and fire. The Union declared it unsavable and began evacuation of the outer planets, leaving behind 3 billion lives. Earth sent one ship, only one. It arrived quietly, unfolded its wings of light, and deployed a machine never seen before, a construct of gravity, nets, shield drones, and solar siphons that formed a shell around the star itself. In 3 hours, the collapse stopped, the star stabilized, the planets saved in. The Union was humiliated because it had taken Earth 3 hours to solve what they had called impossible. The shockwave was complete, had started with a voice now. It moved with momentum, and the galaxy would never be the same again. The Galactic Union had no choice but to speak. The silence became unbearable. Every passing hour made them weaker, and the people began to look not to their leaders, but to the stars, where the ships of Earth now moved like shadows and light, silent watchers that could not be touched, could not be tracked, could not be predicted. The High Council met in a chamber that had not echoed with urgency in centuries. Their robes were older than many of their ships, their titles passed through blood, not merit, their words full of ceremony but empty of understanding. And now they faced something they did not understand, something they could not delay or deny. It requested a meeting, not through command, not through tradition, but through plea. The message, sent across fold space, carried no pride, only request. They asked Earth to speak, to explain, to tell them who these humans were and what they wanted. They expected no answer, but Earth replied. A ship arrived above the Union core world, not cloaked, not hidden, not surrounded by weapons. It was white silver, glowing softly like a drop of moonlight, shaped like no known vessel. Its surface smooth, alive, humming gently, as if breathing. Did not land, it did not fire, it did not ask for clearance. It simply existed in place, and from it a single figure descended, wrapped in light, walking on nothing, moving without sound. The council gathered in the grand hall, a room carved from living crystal and older than many stars. The alien leaders sat on their tall thrones, glowing symbols etched behind them, languages lost to time, and pride in their eyes now replaced by something else, something unfamiliar, something close to fear. The human stepped into the hall. He wore no armor, no crown, no weapons, only a long coat marked with the rising sun, the symbol that now danced across Union systems without resistance, without permission. He stood in silence, and then he spoke. I am Ambassador Kalen of Earth. His voice was calm, clear, deeper than sound, and lighter than thought. It carried not just words, but meaning, memory, message. He raised his hand, and the walls lit up with history, not of the Union, but of Earth. They saw images of early rockets burning into the sky, of men walking on the moon, of satellites reaching the edge of the solar system, of cities rising, of fires falling, of wars that shook the ground, and peace that rebuilt it. They saw humans laugh, cry, suffer, build, fall, rise again. They saw every mistake, every lesson, every truth, and every lie, all told in a sequence of light and sound and silence more honest than anything the Union had seen in centuries. They watched humanity crawl, then walk, then run, and they saw what Earth had become. They saw floating cities wrapped in cloud gardens and crystal towers, machines that sang with birds' power pulled from starlight and silence, children learning languages never spoken by aliens before, ships that folded reality like pages in a book, AI that worked not as servants, but as partners, disease cured, age slowed, hunger erased. They saw a world not ruled by kings or warlords, but by purpose and patience and vision. And then Kalen spoke again. We watched you laugh at us. We watched you forget us. We listened when you said we were nothing, and we waited because time is not your weapon anymore. It is ours. The council could not speak, not because they were forbidden, but because they had no words. They had ruled through presence, through pride, through position, but now their thrones felt cold, their crowns felt heavy, and their voices felt like echoes from a forgotten age. One counselor finally stood, a being of glass and light, his form flickering with emotion. He asked, "What do you want from us?" Kalen looked at him with eyes that held centuries and said nothing. Then He smiled. We want nothing. We came to see, to listen, to understand, because you never did. You ruled, but did not lead. You watched, but did not learn. You spoke, but did not hear. So we did, and now we do not need anything from you, because what we needed we built. Ourselves. One by one the council members stood and left, not in defiance, not in insult, but in silence, because they knew the truth had been spoken, and truth does not wait for permission. Kalen returned to his ship and vanished. No signal, no threat, no goodbye, only the memory of what he had shown them. The news spread like wildfire, not by press, not by control, but by whisper, by image, by feeling. Across 1,000 planets, people saw the transmission, and something inside them changed, because for the first time in their lives they saw a civilization that had risen without conquest, without help, without favor. People who had been mocked, forgotten, left behind, and yet surpassed them. Children began to paint the rising sun beside their old flags. Teachers added Earth history to their schools. Workers asked for Earth machines. Healers asked for Earth medicine. The Union leaders tried to stop it, but they were too late, because belief had shifted, and belief is the true throne of any empire on Earth. The core watched and waited. They knew the galaxy was not ready. They knew the fear would grow, but they also knew something deeper had begun. Not dominance, not control, but transformation, because now the galaxy knew Earth not as a myth, not as a child, but as a mirror. A mirror that showed what could be, what had been missed, what still might come. Alia returned to Halo and was greeted not with celebration, but with purpose. The next phase was not about arrival. It was about choice, to share, or to hold, to lead, or to vanish. And Earth had already decided they would offer nothing, but they would refuse no one. Those who came with open minds would be welcomed. Those who came with weapons would be disarmed. Those who came with lies would be shown truth, and those who came with fear would be left to drown in their own shadows. Because Earth did not rise to conquer, it rose to remind the stars what it means to grow, what it means to fall, and what it means to rise again. The galaxy now saw Earth, and Earth had never looked more human. The stars no longer belonged to the old powers. They no longer echoed only the voice of the Union. Now they whispered a new name in every corner of the galaxy, the name of Earth, a name once ignored, now carried like fire across dry, winsome embraced the change. They looked to the sky and sent signals of peace, of request, of alliance, not out of fear, but out of hope. They had watched the transmission of the ambassadors, seen the vision of Earth, and in it they saw something more than power. They saw purpose. Others chose defiance. They sharpened their claws, loaded their ships, gathered their fleets, and prepared to strike back. They called Earth a trick, a ghost, a threat. They claimed the humans had cheated, had stolen knowledge, had bent reality in ways that no one should. The Union fractured from within. Old allies grew suspicious. Old enemies grew quiet. Planets began closing their borders. Leaders vanished, replaced by younger voices, louder voices, desperate voices. The fear of losing power began to rot the very core of the empires that once stood unshaken on the planet Eris. A council of warlords declared open resistance. They sent fleets toward Earth's known observation zones with weapons drawn, and banners raised. Their message was clear: we will not kneel. The response came not with ships, not with guns, but with silence. As their fleets approached, a shadow covered them, a ripple across the stars that bent light and time. Their sensors failed, their engines froze, their captains lost contact with their minds. Then they returned alive, but broken, their ships untouched, but offline, their weapons undamaged, but useless, their databases wiped clean, replaced by a single symbol burned into every screen: the rising sun of Earth. On the moon of Gresha, a mining colony declared independence from the Union and sent a message to Earth asking for aid, asking to join the vision, asking to become something more. They received food, water, shelter, energy, technology, medical care, all within 3 days, all delivered by drones. No demands, no instructions, no flags, only a short message that said, welcome to the light. The contrast grew sharper with every system that made its choice to bow and rise, or to fight and fall. The core knew this moment would come. They had not planned for war, but they had prepared for resistance, not with armies, but with understanding, not with bullets, but with balance. On Earth, the leaders met again, not in fear, not in panic, but in calm. They gathered in the sky fortress called Ether, built above the clouds, held by pillars of magnetic wind, powered by light and silence, its walls alive with data, its halls filled with the sound of peaceful minds. They reviewed the maps, watched the movements, tracked the whispers of rebellion and peace, and they made a choice. They would not rule, but they would not be ignored. The new policy was born: intervene only when asked, silence when spoken to, with pride, truth when spoken to, with lies, aid when requested, with honesty, shield When the innocent are threatened, strike only when the stars demand it, and so the galaxy moved into a new phase one where choice was the battlefield, and the heart the prize. On the edge of Union space, a powerful fleet, led by the House of Tharn, began a march across 7 systems, claiming they would purge all traces of Earth influence. They destroyed a research station on a neutral moon and blocked communication to 3 peaceful colonies. They sent a message to Earth daring them to respond. They received no answer. Instead, every ship in the fleet suddenly dropped from folded space, not damaged, not attacked, just moved, placed far from their target into orbit around an old sun where they could see themselves reflected in silence. Then their weapons shut down, their engines turned cold, their crew could still breathe, still think, but could not act. And then came the message: you seek to punish those who chose light, then feel what darkness truly is. Your fire is not stronger than truth, your pride is not stronger than purpose. You may move again when your hands have learned peace. 3 days later, the fleet returned home, and none would speak of what they saw. Meanwhile, more systems sent their requests to Earth, not just for help, but for learning. They asked, how did you rise? How did you grow? How did you stay hidden so long? And Earth replied with a gift, a sphere of light no larger than a fruit sent to each planet. That asked it floated above the capital city and glowed with warm pulses. Every person who stood near it heard the same words in their own language: grow with kindness, grow with courage, grow with questions. Do not copy us, become more than us. These spheres changed everything. They did not teach, they inspired. They did not command, they invited. Children began to dream again, elders began to speak again, artists began to create again. Science bloomed not in imitation, but in awakening. The leaders of Earth watched and waited. They did not step forward because they did not need to. Their strength was in patience, their power in restraint, but they never stopped watching. The Shadow Fleet grew not in number, but in vision. New ships were built, shaped like ideas, shaped like movement itself. Ships that could fold not just space but experience. Ships that could see not just light, but meaning. They patrolled quietly, visiting systems that showed signs of suffering, systems that sent no request, but needed help. They would leave behind clean water, restored networks, healed air, and never reveal who had done it. People called them ghosts, others called them angels, but the truth was simpler. They were humans, and they had not come to be worshipped. They had come to be remembered. Back in the heart of the Union, a final act of defiance was planned. A secret weapon buried in the core of a planet, a pulse designed to disrupt the fold engines of any Earth vessel. It was built in silence, powered by stolen tech, wrapped in layers of pride and fear. The day it activated, nothing happened because Earth had already known. The weapon disarmed itself. Every screen on the planet flickered with a single phrase: you cannot blind those who already see. After that, the resistance began to fade, not through defeat, but through awakening. The stars began to settle. The noise began to quiet, and the galaxy realized something it had never understood before. Power was not in control, it was in direction. It was in the ability to lift without weight to guide, without chains to protect, without walls. And Earth had done that without ruling, without owning, without demanding. The choice was clear: bow and rise, or break and be forgotten. And the stars began to kneel, not to a master but to a mirror called Earth. The galaxy no longer turned as it once did, no longer spun to the rhythm of old powers, no longer echoed only with the voices of ancient empires. Now it moved with something different, something quiet, something strong. From the ashes of pride, from the ruins of silence, from the shadows of forgotten stars, a new order began, not by force, not by decree, not by chains or fire, but by choice, by thought, by truth. The name Earth was now spoken, not with laughter, not with mockery, not with ignorance, but with respect, with caution, with wonder. It had once been a symbol of simplicity, now it had become a symbol of change. In the deep reaches of Union space, where cold suns still blinked and hollow cities floated in quiet grief, there rose sparks of light. Not from warships, not from politics, but from people who had seen what Earth showed and chose to rise. Teachers taught history again, not the history of thrones, but the history of growth, of mistakes, of struggle and repair. Stories of humans who had no stars, who had no fleets, who had no magic, yet built their sky from hope and pain and questions. Young minds reached further than ever, not to copy Earth, not to beg for secrets, but to find their own path, guided by the silent strength they had seen. Healers used Earth's light to study the root of disease, not to steal cures, but to understand the code of life that the humans had shaped with time. And care builders learned from Earth's living cities and began to grow new homes from stone and song, From crystal and wind artists painted new suns, farmers rewrote the soil, children dreamed not of empires, but of peace. It did not happen fast, it did not happen everywhere, but it began, and beginnings hold power on earth. The core met for the last time in the chamber beneath the sea, a place built when the stars were still a secret. They stood around the circle, not as rulers, not as kings, not as saviors, but as servants of something bigger than themselves. They reviewed the maps, the shifts, the choices, the calls for guidance and the calls for silence. They saw systems lift themselves with kindness. They saw leaders once cold now open their hands. They saw old flags lowered not in defeat, but in peace, and they made a decision: the core would dissolve its purpose. Fulfilled, Earth no longer needed to hide, and the galaxy no longer needed to be pushed. It only needed to be reminded that evolution is not a race, that power is not a throne, that greatness begins with humility and ends with understanding. So the final message was sent not as command, not as declaration, but as a whisper carried on the fold through every system, every sun, every space between. The voice of Earth once more filled the stars. We are not your rulers, we are not your gods, we are not your end, we are your mirror, and in that reflection you will find yourself. Choose your path. We will not stop you, we will not lead you, but we will walk with you. If you walk with truth, if you walk with care, if you walk with purpose, then you will not walk alone. And then the message faded, and no more came. The shadow fleet returned to the deep. The beacons of Earth went silent. The lights of its ships dimmed across the stars, not because Earth had vanished, but because Earth had arrived, and now it stepped back to let the galaxy find itself. Years passed, and those years became legend, but not the kind sung by warriors, the kind whispered by mothers, taught in fields, painted on walls, lived in choices. A young girl on the planet Isen asked her grandmother once, "Who are the humans?" And her grandmother smiled. She said, "They were the ones who showed us how to listen." A boy on the frozen moon of Trell asked his teacher, "What was Earth?" And the teacher pointed to the sky and said it was a light that never burned but always warmed on. A drifting ship in the black between galaxies, a lonely crew played music from Earth. They did not know the words, but they felt the meaning. On a dying world once lost to war, a tree began to grow. Its roots were fed by Earth water, its leaves shimmered with light drawn from Earth wells. Its fruit gave vision to a child who would one day speak to stars, and across all of space the name Earth no longer meant just a place. It meant something more. It meant possibility, it meant memory, it meant balance. In the hearts of those who had once ruled with fire and now guided with peace, there was no more pride, only gratitude, because in the end they had laughed at Earth's simplicity, but Earth had never been simple. Earth had only been waiting, watching, learning. And when the time came, Earth had returned, not to conquer, not to destroy, but to remind the stars that silence can build mountains, that kindness can shift empires, that patience can rewrite fate, and that even the smallest world can become the guide of a galaxy.